This episode was brought to you by Google Cloud, a partner that needs no introduction. What you might not have heard of, though, is that Google offers a Google for Startups cloud program where they give you access to startup experts, technical training, business support, and cover your Google Cloud costs up to $200,000 for 2 years, or even $350,000 if you're an AI startup. Scale your startup faster and smarter with Google Cloud. Head over to goo.gle/Swisspreneur.
When you're an immigrant, you have to do 2 times the work or 10 times the work than all the default around you. Because somehow it's like easier when you have the support system. You have your grandma there, grandfather there, you have connections. Oh, your father knows the guy that works in this bank, so you get like a job. And I always felt like, oh, I have to work 10 times more than everyone around me. And this is up till today. Like even when I went to the lab, I have this like inner urgency, or I have to work 10 times more than everyone around me.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Sylvan.
Marko, a very well welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you as a guest today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
You are the co-founder and CEO at SwissMile, a deep tech ETH spin-off connecting AI with the physical world through autonomous machines. Before we learn more about what that actually means, you were born in Yugoslavia, and then you did your bachelor's and master's in Germany, and then also your PhD at ETH here in Zurich. Yeah. So I wonder, how did these 3 different countries shape you as a person?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point how they shape me as a person. I think all of them in a different way. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was born in ex-Yugoslavia. Maybe some of the listeners don't even know what Yugoslavia is today, because a few years after I was born, there was like a civil war coming up. So the country was like in war. My parents, and together with me as a baby, decided to get to Germany. So we were like immigrants living in Germany. And I think Germany had an interesting effect on me because, let's say, my parents had much more experience with the war, but I was not really in the war, but I grew up, let's say, as an immigrant on asylum for many years in Germany. Mm-hmm. Took us like 12, 13 years to get permanent residency. So that was like a shaping factor. But then, I was always interested in math and physics. In school, I was not so good at other subjects. I was too lazy for them. But math and physics I enjoyed. So I studied mechanical engineering in TU Darmstadt, but I also lived abroad for studies in Norway, Trondheim, and for my master thesis in Australia. I'm in Brisbane, and then from the warm Australia, I went directly to Switzerland to do my PhD. So that's like in a fast way what my journey was. I think since I'm living here in Switzerland, I think it's one of the best countries that I've ever visited so far for living.
In what way? That's really interesting to know.
I don't want to say this because of the German thing, but it's somehow the better version of Germany. Okay. In a way, I mean, it's smaller, more compact, so you don't have all these big issues. So I think it's a very well educated country, a very high standard of living. I think it comes also with some downsides that you can get used to, let's say, the lifestyle here. But so far, I really like it. And especially Zurich, of being so international, it's very, very nice.
It's the right place for you to be in that very moment, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in TU Darmstadt, I told my friends, I want to do my PhD at DTH. And then I actually tried. I reached out to Roland Siegwart. I wrote him like 3 emails, and then he ignored me first. But then I said, I looked at this webpage, said, they're collaborating with Australia. And then I said, maybe I go to Australia, get some vitamin C. So I went there, got some people to know. They make an intro to Roland. Roland replied. He said, well, maybe you talk to this new professor, Professor Marko Huta, who's joining, he's opening a new lab. And I was lucky enough that he took me as a PhD, and I think that was one of the defining moments of me really going really deep into robotics.
I love that story because it seems that ETH really is what ultimately attracted you to come to Switzerland.
Yeah.
What made ETH stand out? Because you went to Australia, you could have gone anywhere in the world, basically.
Yeah, so there were like 3 places I looked into, like very superficially. I chose Stanford, MIT, and ETH Zurich. Yeah. But then I looked very deeply into the teams, and there were, at the end of the day, ETH as a brand, like, gave me the attention to ETH Zurich, but that individual persons at ETH Zurich, like, convinced me that I want to be there. And it was then in the end Roland Siegwart. Then there was also all the drone stuff that has been doing. Raffaello De Andrea, his drone show back then, I think was the TED Talk, was amazing.
He was also on the podcast before. Yeah.
Ah, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, so like when I saw his drone show, oh my gosh, how do they do this? Yeah. Then there were a few more, Professor Marko Huta also with the Leggett stuff. And then there was also a TED Talk by Peter Fankhauser.
Yeah, also have been on the show, yeah.
So Peter Fankhauser did like a nice show with the robot called ReZero. Yeah. And then I knew that he's doing a PhD at Marko Huta's lab. Then I looked at carefully all of the people in Marko Huta's lab. And I saw like, oh, those are the smartest people that I have seen just on paper. So that if I get the chance to work with them and learn from all these people, then this can only make me better as well.
Wow, that's very nice to hear that this attracted you to Switzerland. Outstanding.
Yeah, thanks.
And now that was the research part. Of course, we're also interested to the intersection with entrepreneurship. One of your, I'm not sure, probably first touching points with entrepreneurship was a family company that you managed in 2020 and then you negotiated a sale in 2021. Yeah. Was that sort of the first touching point for you with entrepreneurship?
I think at the age of 14, maybe. So my father worked in industrial insulation, and I started working with him on the construction side since like I'm 14, 15. Maybe a lot of the Yugos know that when your parents tell you, okay, you have too much energy, you should go and work. So that's what I did. And then it was my father lost his job. And then it was like, oh, his age and everything. How could he find another job on the construction side? And actually then my mom and then me as well, we encouraged my father to start his own company. And then we all 3 together, and me, I was like 16, 17. My brother, who's 6 years younger, also helped a lot. We like started this company, but my dad was the main guy doing the projects. But my parents didn't know how to use a computer, so they had to do all this like invoicing. Their German was not as good, so reading all legal documents. So I had to, from young age, help my father with invoicing, quotations, some of the legal stuff. And my brother also as well. So at some point when I didn't have so much time, my brother was younger, he took over. And then we had like a tragedy in the family where both my parents couldn't continue that business. Then during COVID, my brother and I, we were forced to basically go to Germany and see what we do with the company. So then we basically finished all the projects that were going on, handled all the people that were still hired there. And then also, since this was not our passion to work on the construction side, we said, okay, it only makes sense to try to maybe sell the company. So it's not a lot of money, but it was like quite an experience to actually do a little kind of exit
of course.
with the company. Yeah,
that must have been kept you and your brother quite busy in that time, I imagine. And since you sort of grew up with the entrepreneurial spirit in the family, was it ever an option or even a career wish from your side to also become an entrepreneur one day, or the opposite?
I don't know, this wish for entrepreneurship. I don't actually know where this comes from. Or I think one thing that showed me actually with the story of my dad, that it's possible to do it. You know, like,
Amazing.
I think when you don't have the example, you live in a world like your only path is to work for someone, right?
Yeah.
But there is also a path, and it's actually not that hard to start a company. To actually have the company flourish or survive is hard.
Of course.
But the starting point is actually not that hard.
Yeah. So you had a role model with your dad in that sense.
Yeah. Exactly.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
And one last part before we dive into your company story. You have basically been an immigrant in almost all the countries that you have been, worked, lived. And many entrepreneurs that come on the show, they also say this immigrant mindset also helped me to be a better entrepreneur. Did you experience something similar?
For me, home is where I'm living or where my friends are, or my family. It's not a country, because when I went back to Serbia, Bosnia, Yugoslavia, people would also call me, oh, the German is coming back, you know?
I see, yeah.
When I'm in German, I'm also the Yugo, you know? Yeah. When I'm here, either or, someone choose to call me a Yugo or they call me to be the German, right? Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it helps that I feel much more free by not belonging to a country and just choosing where I want to be next to the people that I like to be around, right? Yeah. And I think one aspect that actually, like, I'm a hustler in my deep down. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're an immigrant, you have to do 2 times the work or 10 times the work than all the default around you. Yeah. Because somehow it's like easier when you have the support system. You have your grandma there, grandfather there. You have connections. Oh, your father knows the guy that works in this bank. So you get like a job. And I always felt like, oh, I have to work 10 times more than everyone around me. Mm-hmm. And this is up till today. Like, even when I went to the lab, I have this like inner urgency, or I have to work 10 times more than everyone around me. Yeah.
And I guess that is then the part that makes you a better entrepreneur, because you just work harder than anyone else around you.
Yeah, I mean, working hard is one aspect. Working smart is the other one, right? I don't think that everyone has to work hard to be successful, but I think it just works for me quite good, yeah.
Great. So let's talk about your company, SwissSmile. Yeah. You founded it in 2023. You were 5 co-founders in total. So I wonder, did you meet your other 4 co-founders also at or through ETH?
Yeah, so we founded the company last year, 2023, in April. But the co-founders I all know since 2018. Same lab. Yeah. Professor Marko I know since I joined the lab. Yeah. And we all, at the beginning, did our own journey. Like, I worked on one topic, Giorgio worked on another topic, Lawrence on another topic, and Alex. And somehow over the time we converged, and we said, look, there is an opportunity. Like, there's like cool technology, interest from the industry. Hey, you guys are smart. I like you all. Why don't we basically marry and create this company? Yeah.
And please also tell us a bit more how your PhD research actually relates to your company, to SwissSmile.
Yeah. So the research that I did was for the first time to add wheels to these 4-legged robots. So in the past, everyone knows like Boston Dynamics, the 4-legged robots. There's also Animal from Robotics with 4 legs. Yeah. Robotics is a spin-off also from the Robotics Systems Lab. So they're a little bit more mature than us, like by 5-6 years. Mm-hmm. And they were focused on industrial inspection solutions. And the nice thing is, this collaboration helped us also to build on top of this Animal platform of Robotics. And back then I was always like annoyed how slow these 4-legged robots are. And for me, it didn't make sense that we recreate nature and that we want to build these legs. So I basically added, as part of my research, wheels to the legs. And that became an interesting problem, because out of sudden, the whole problem of how this platform should move from one place to another became more difficult, because the robot could choose when to drive, when to step. You can drive much faster, so you have to also regulate your speed depending on where you are. Mm-hmm. And solving that problem together with that platform was part of the PhD that came into the company as well, where we also saw so many benefits of having the best of both worlds, basically.
You make it sound so easy, but that was a pretty big step forward, right? To also have the capability of driving robots and choosing whether you want to walk or drive or whatsoever. Yeah. So what are these robots capable of doing? Because they can suddenly do everything to a certain degree.
Yeah, actually, it's like an ultimate mobility platform, I like to say, because when you go to a legged robot, you have like 1 hour battery, 1.5 hours battery. You can maybe cover 3 kilometers on one battery life, and you have like relatively low speed. Now, out of sudden, we have 5 times more battery, we have 5 times higher speeds, and 10 times higher reach. This means it unlocks new applications. Let's say it doesn't make so much sense on an industrial inspection platform. Depending on how big it is, it might actually make sense, but not in almost all the cases, because inspection you need to do maybe once a day, once a week. So it doesn't really matter the speed and the range that a robot could do. You could basically charge multiple times and go into different areas. But then there's so many applications where you need 24/7 throughput. Let's say, imagine security going around the building, or let's say delivery, warehouse logistics, intralogistics. There it's about what your throughput is. That's what you optimize. So you have to constantly, all these numbers then start to matter more.
And that is a real game change. I mean, 5 or 10x improvements. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So it's also funny because like in our field in research, a lot of these 4-legged robots researchers, they're trying to compete by having a faster robot, right? And they improve it by 1.1 the motor or something. But like, I think it's a valuable thing to do from a research perspective. But I think practically it's much easier to just add wheels.
Yeah, you talk about a very different scope here with the innovation that you bring to the table. Yeah. You also work with an AI component. Can you tell us a bit more about that and what role that AI plays in your platform?
Yeah, so in our lab with Professor Marko, we were one of the first ones in the lab to run artificial neural networks on legged robots. And artificial neural networks is basically digital recreation of the structure of a brain. And this artificial brain, you can train in a way to do a certain task. And we just saw that by training a task of how to move, this algorithm was outperforming whatever we have done years before in robotics. Wow. And in my research, it was impossible with the tools we had on hand in robotics to solve the problem of this hybrid platform, because optimizing when to step and when not to step was impossible with the algorithms. You would have to solve an optimization problem that would take minutes to solve. Yeah. And out of sudden we run these neural networks and it solves it. And it's done. And it becomes this brain learns to consider this body with the wheels together as a whole, rather than like separate things.
And I assume that's also why the timing is right to do that right now, because before it was just simply technologically not really possible.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's, you know, in our field, a lot of people say like it's an iPhone moment and stuff like that. But it is a little bit like that because fundamentally nothing new came. All this deep learning exists for many years. The theory didn't change, but what changes just the infrastructure and everything. Now you have AWS where you can run your GPUs on the cloud. You don't have to set it up yourself, so it's super convenient. You have sensor technology that comes from autonomous driving that is cheap. The hardware is getting cheaper. And all of this is now at the moment where it actually can really scale. And for us, when these neural networks came, we only started focusing on that. And this is like the whole, let's say, technology that we are now developing is to push the boundaries of that.
Is it also because of your research that you were so deep in that topic that you immediately realized its potential?
Yeah. I mean, the first time I saw it to solve the problem that I tried to solve in 5 years. Yeah. And actually, the initial project was through a student thesis. I was like, let's explore how this would work on a robot. And then we supervised a student, Juno Lee and we came back and then we see, oh my gosh, it's better than what I did 5 years in my PhD. Okay,
Insane.
then I throw away all the stuff I did at the PhD, and we started from there. And all the co-founders, for example, Lawrence, he also worked on these deep neural networks from a different perspective. Giorgio built his own quadruped during his PhD. He was more on the hardware side. And Alex was at some point starting to explore with me, let's say, how to digitalize the world so that we can use it for training. So all of us together made us collectively much stronger with our technology.
It's like all the different puzzle pieces coming together.
Yeah.
And now I'm really curious that we now have a bit of a better understanding about the technological aspect and why the timing is right. What industries do you cater to? Who is your end user and use case in the end? Because the possibilities seem so wide and so big.
Yeah, that's $1 billion question. So once we can solve this, I think then we are good and our investors will be happy. And that's exactly the questions that we want to solve. So again, we were founded last year. We had a lot of success on social media. We had collectively with all of the videos, more than 100 million views. A lot of industry reached out. So I had more than 150 companies leads, and I have daily inquiries from companies that come with problems to me. And I was listening to all of them, and then you try to categorize them. You try to see patterns, how many clients have the same issue, right? And so we looked at many different aspects, and I think there is a big potential for robots to do a lot of things, but we also have to stay in the reality of what we have today to see how can the technology already help today. And some of the aspects that we saw is let's say some logistics application and the security application to be very relevant.
Can you tell us a bit more about these use cases so people can better understand what you exactly do on the security and logistic fields?
Yeah, so security, it's like imagine critical infrastructure where you have to go 24/7 around to check if everything is okay. That's a very boring task, repetitive task. It's hard to find people for these kind of jobs. People are getting more and more, let's say, spoiled all over the world for good reasons. So the standard of living everywhere in the world is rising. So these kind of boring kind of tasks, patrolling and checking if everything is correct. And if something is wrong, you alert and then you make sure that it's safe. Then logistics application, we had in the past, we have today quite some success with robotics in, let's say, warehouses. If you look at, we have a lot of static arms. We have a lot of these systems like the Kiva system that Raffaello De Andrea made and was then bought by Amazon, became Amazon Robotics. It's like wheel platform that works on perfectly flat terrain. So the inside warehouse is already quite automated, but there is still room for automation when it comes to bringing stuff from inside the warehouse outside, because then the world becomes more challenging. And then you also have to, out of sudden, solve mobile manipulation, not just static arms, but also an arm that is on top of the robot to do this kind of application.
Wow. It seems like we're really entering the future here. That's so exciting.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
And with these use cases that you now see, okay, there's a new technological breakthrough. Now you get into we crystal out which use cases make the most sense for us. What are your thoughts on the business model? How do you want to capture the value that you generate for these two use cases?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of business model, at this stage of the company, we solely focus on, let's say, on the customer side. Actually, we want to solve the problem of the customer. So our biggest concern is can our clients save money? And then the second question comes, okay, can we still make some money afterwards once our clients save some money?
Right.
And then actually, when you do the math, you can really achieve that. And that's also these robotics machines are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and more performing. Yeah.
That's a very good trend. Cheaper and you can do more. Is your business model in a traditional sort of combination of you buy or you sell the hardware, the customer buys the hardware, and you sell them a subscription on top of that for the software part, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so let's say in our field, when you ask roboticists, they say, oh, we do RaaS, like robotics as a service. And like, when you're really on the ground, it's like, we are thinking about it. So there are many different ways of how you can combine it. The client pays upfront a certain amount, and then there's a recurring revenue over time, or you want to package everything together and you offer 5 years, let's say, servicing or something like that. So there are many different ways of how to achieve this, but it's really also depending not just of what is from a cash flow perspective good for your company, but also really matters in which industry you are. And that's similar to how we are now exploring these use cases. We're also exploring what is actually the right business model for us and the client so that this thing works.
Because this has to match. Otherwise, you can have the best business model, but no clients, and it's going to be useless.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I want to talk about one very specific challenge that probably a lot of ETH spin-offs face. You combine hardware and software.
Yeah.
I from talking to you, I already sense you like to do difficult, you like to do hard stuff, because you said, these are the smartest people. I want to go and work with them. But usually when we talk to investors or whoever, they say, do one of the two, software or hardware, but never both at the same time. You do both at the same time. How challenging is that?
Yeah, I think it's very challenging and mostly it's all about the feedback loop that you get from your clients. When you do software, you can deploy a new version very quickly and get feedback from the client, which say, oh, I like this feature, but I don't like this. Right. I would pay for this feature, or can you maybe build this feature?
And you just do it. It's easy. Yeah.
So what you want is like almost like daily feedback, right? Yeah. When you do hardware, it takes time to do the changes. Mm-hmm. And then so if a client comes with a wish, can you add this sensor on top or this functionality? Out of sudden, you have to build for 3 months. And you go to the client and then you get the feedback loop. So the feedback loop is much slower. Mm-hmm. However, there's a little trick that we do nowadays as a company. In the past, a lot of robotics companies have to have an idea and they have to build the first robot. So similar to, let's say, Boston Dynamics, Anybotics, Animal. So you build a robot or you decide to build for maybe a use case, and then it takes 2 years to have something reliably. Then you go with this not so reliable robot to the client and you get your first feedback initially after 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then you figure out, your client say, oh, I need this, but I actually don't need this, right? Smart. So this initial, and you spend a lot of financial resources on the initial phase. In our case, we are buying the platform, the robot, and we can from day one go to the client and gather feedback from the client directly. Yeah. And this is like one speed up for us. And also for our investors, it's quite nice because it means most of the money that we get today goes into R&D, mostly software development, which creates one of the largest IP holders. And if you want, at some point, need to build your own hardware, you will start from a set of requirements where it's very clear what you have to build. The challenge of building hardware is because you don't know for what. So you over-design the system. But if you know exactly for what, you make it not over or under-designed based on the specs of the client.
So if I understand that correctly, you use existing hardware and focus on the software adaptation and change in that sense. Yeah. And only afterwards, with the specific feedback and requirements, you then start eventually to fine-tune the hardware as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow. So it's all about shortening that feedback loop cycle.
Exactly, yeah. Wow. And that's very important. And actually, in the beginning, the KPI of our company is this feedback loop needs to be reduced. Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. I never heard or saw it like this before. This is really impressive.
Thanks, yeah.
I also want to talk about something that you won. You participated in the DARPA Subterranean Challenge. Yeah. It's also called the Super Bowl of Robotics, and you won it. Yeah. What did that mean to you? How did you, pull it off, and what did it mean for you personally and for the company?
Yeah, so there were many different people involved in this. It was like a 3 years competition. It was not just ETH Zurich, but also other universities involved, also from the US and some other institutes in Europe. So it was a larger team. Lawrence and me were involved in this team, so two of our co-founders. We spent quite some time during our PhD working on this. And this was a very nice experience because like you had to solve a real world problem. So it was not just, oh, I do a video and I work on the next thing and I write my next paper, but like consistently you had to go into that competition and solve it. And it was through the AI technology that we had that made one of the, let's say, the last % of why we won this competition was the software development by some of the people in our lab, Jamin and Junho, that started this trend. And what they did is this new thing that doesn't fall and it's robust. And other teams had the Boston Dynamics spot there, which was like falling quite often per run. And this was the defining factor. No.
Well done. This is so impressive to just hear about it.
Yeah.
And this, of course, winning the Super Bowl in that sense also attracted quite some attention. In your case, of none other than Jeff Bezos, who co-led your 22 million seed round. Well, first of all, that's a crazy seed round to raise. And he co-invested with the Chinese fund HongShan, if I pronounced it correctly.
Yeah.
So I just wonder, how did you pull that off? Because winning both a Chinese fund and Jeff Bezos as investors for 22 million as a seed round, that's like insane.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to it. I mean, one funny thing is the Washington Post that wrote this article about the Super Bowl of robotics belongs to Jeff Bezos,
exactly,
by the way. So that's quite funny. But I really don't know how this connection to Jeff Bezos started. I'm a big believer in connections. It's so important to talk to people, be interested into people. And I believe the connection to Jeff Bezos was at the end, like multiple people that were involved and maybe some conversations behind my back that I don't even know.
Yeah.
And you never know that with whoever you talk can be a random person. So like I always try to have some time for making these connections. I also went to Silicon Valley for fundraising. I went and did like a little tour there, trying through my existing investors to be introduced and from this introduction to be introduced with others. So this is how I made this initial moves. It's interesting, the Asian and the US constellation now around. I mean, HongShan is formerly was part of Sequoia Capital. So the owner of that, Neil Shen, he had a lot of success. If you look at a little bit of the stats of Sequoia, he was one of the main guys that was driving the success of Sequoia at that time. He had his own 2 startups that he IPO'd in New York. So I met him as well, and he's like an amazing figure. I mean, most of the money is anyway from the US because like the HongShan fund is through, let's say, US investors as well. So I would say the goal is always to try to go to the US. Yeah.
Nevertheless, it was probably also a purposeful decision from your side to have both angles, the Chinese investor and the US investor. Was that a strategic rationale? Because you say, hey, both markets are potentially really important and really promising for you.
Yeah, so HongShan has quite some, let's say, connections in whole Asia.
Yeah.
Asia is an amazing place, not just China, but also, let's say, other places like Korea, Japan, Singapore, India, Malaysia, Indonesia. It's such a rapidly changing environment in all of these countries. And if you look at the technology adoption rate of new technology or robots,
fast.
It's much higher over there.
Yeah.
And the US obviously is still like the economy of the world. And also when you go to Silicon Valley, this is a lot of people say in Zurich there's like the Silicon Valley of Europe, but I always say like it would take so many years to have the same kind of environment here, because if you go to a random coffee place in Silicon Valley, you hear people talking about, oh, what's your value proposition, or which investors are you talking about, right? So there is such a big difference still. And I think if you want to have an international company, you need to have high ambitions, and you need to have the right investors that believe in that ambitions. And actually, these kind of investors that we put in, these are the right ones, like the Asian and the American one that really believes in our, let's say, vision and the technology roadmap.
I have so many more questions, but you just opened like a whole new box for me.
Yeah.
First of all, I love what you say about being ambitious and also having the right investors to back it up. Nevertheless, we are recording this interview here in Zurich. So why is Zurich still the right place for you to be located? Shouldn't you be moving to Silicon Valley as well, or to China?
I think Europe lacks we just recently, I talked to a person that we newly hired, and I always like complained, Europe is so risk averse, and the US are taking crazy risks, and they create all of these amazing companies like Google, Microsoft, Apple. Where's Europe's Apple and Microsoft in the last decade? So that's a little bit of a problem. But then he replied to me, well, if you have more capital, you can be more risky. If a company has 100 million in a bank or 10 million, you choose different strategies. And I think it's still the case that the US is like very eager in investing a lot into new technologies and new startup develops. And I think this is a little bit still missing in Europe. I think this has to change in Europe as well. Or Europe finds a way to attract also more investors. But I think times are changing a bit as well, I think, in Europe. I talk to more investors, like very good investors in Silicon Valley, and they more and more look at also Europe.
Especially also ETH, like it puts Switzerland on the map, you know, EPFL and ETH, which is great news for the whole ecosystem.
Actually, I forgot to answer why Zurich, right? I think at the end of the day, capital is one thing, but you can move capital easy, but talent is harder to move. And actually, through ETH Zurich, we have like talent creating machinery that we can leverage. And some of the problems we have to solve is like really, we need to have the best minds of the world. And I think the US has also these institutes, a lot of good universities, but we have it as well here in Europe.
In the US, you probably also have more competition for these same talents, I would assume.
Yeah, if you go to Silicon Valley and you make a startup and you compete with Google that pays $500,000 to an engineer, then
difficult.
That's difficult.
The other thing you talked about is also this thinking big, being very ambitious and going global. Also something that is not necessarily linked to Switzerland or Europe in general. We often are happy to be a very good second, but not the number one in the world. So first of all, where does that mindset come from? Where did you get it from? Because still some founders here, they say, I'm happy, I want to be number one in Switzerland, maybe expand to Europe, but I have no global ambitions. Where did that come from in your case?
I think what I said, so I cannot speak for the other founders. I can only speak for myself. I mentioned something this, I have to do 10 times more than any others. And I think this continues. So when I like see myself and I'm surrounded by the ecosystem here, I always feel like, I need to do 10 times more. And this is like my drive. Yeah.
So some do a 2 or 3 million seed round, you do a 22 million seed round, 10x. It makes sense.
Yeah, true. It's a robot and the company always like doing 10x.
Exactly. And now with these big name investors that you have, also the money that they invested in your company, how do you feel now? Do you feel more like a relief and say, great, we have money in the bank, now we can really execute and follow our vision? Or did the pressure just increase? You just went like also 10 levels up to now say, okay, now we really need to make it work and we really need to deliver.
Yeah. I mean, was a we wanted this from day one. So we founders, we had the conversation, what kind of company do we want, right? I mean, we said like, let's aim big and let's go there, let's hustle hard. And we will have such an experience through that. Even if we would fail, we would have, the experience will always stay. But I think what changed is that through this investment, actually, there are people that give you the shot. What I mean by that, I think there are a lot of great minds that have a lot of great ideas, right? Maybe even better ideas than what we have, right? But a lot of people don't get this opportunity. And I just feel like so excited. Wow, someone really believes in us and believes also in the same vision, and they give us the money and we have here the opportunity. So I take it as a very high responsibility, not just for the investors, but for all the other people that have great ideas but don't get the money, right?
This also seems to increase the pressure on you as a person, right? And I know you're all incredibly talented and very, very smart and intelligent people. At the same time, I wonder, many founders actually talk sometimes behind closed doors about that they feel some sort of an imposter syndrome, that they're not good enough to pull this off, or that now they will not make it. Do you ever fight these battles with yourself, or what goes in within you with, all the stuff going on?
Oh boy. I need a therapist to answer this question. I don't know. I don't really think about it. One aspect that is very nice when you build a startup, I know, let's say as a CEO, there's a certain view on me, or let's say people think about my responsibilities. But what I love most about what's happening now, so we are hiring more people, and actually with every person that joins, I feel like they're taking some of my burden, or maybe Giorgio's or Lawrence or Alex's burden, and we all like somehow support each other. So I feel confident and strong because I have these people behind me, right? And I know that if something goes bad, we will like as a collective work together. So this helps. I mean, you need to feel like a team, and I think if you don't feel that, then you probably will all just take it on yourself.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, and also emphasizes the importance of hiring the right people to really make this a reality. And still, I wonder, do you never doubt yourself along the process? Or
it's I can tell you so many incidents where I doubt myself when I met a client in Saudi Arabia in the desert in the middle of nowhere, and I'm sweating, it's 50 degrees, the robot collapses, or if I'm somewhere and I have to, in a hotel room, screw the robot together, which we did. So the beautiful thing about robotics is that you're grounded every day. So
what keeps you sane in these moments? Because there's a lot of pressure.
So there's the doubt that comes.
Okay.
So I think it's a roller coaster. This like, oh, you have to screw the robot together. Next day you then pitch like, oh, there are going to be billions of robots out there, right? So this is like, you have like these two personalities somehow.
And you stay sort of in a good balance between them to make it work somehow.
Yeah, somehow. But maybe I need to think more about this to answer it.
Because I'm really deeply impressed by your clarity and what you together with the whole team built so far. It's outstanding, and I'm really happy that this is happening in Switzerland. This is amazing.
I mean, we still have a long way to go, but I think we had already a good start now.
Definitely. And that's a perfect segue to sort of looking a bit into the future. So I think we don't need to say more, but you are officially Jeff Bezos approved in that sense. So what are the next milestone that you want to tackle? What are your goals, and what are sort of your things that you work on for the next few months, and probably 12 to 24 months?
So I think there are two very important aspects that we're doing. Number one is the R&D development. So with that money, we want to stay ahead. Like, competition is not sleeping. Everywhere around the world, people are working on this. And if you look a little bit the statistic, or let's say big banks in the world that are evaluating this market, everyone is putting it in the tens of trillions, what the market potential is of AI-enabled robotics, which means, if I look at a little bit, maybe there are 10 to 20 very good startups out there that have the chance to unlock some of these markets. And if you look at the past, it's always a few of them that take a lot of it. So what it means that there will be 2-3 companies at some point that are the next Apple, Microsoft, Google in this space. And that's why everyone is racing with the technology. So if I come back to the first point that we want to stay ahead, we want to work on our technology, we want to have the best embodied AI in the world. That's what we want to build. And for that, you need to spend money for good people. The second aspect is on go-to-market strategy. So really not just building technology for the sake of technology, but also really building it on real-world like interactions with the clients. So not that you end up wasting a lot of your time building something that is not needed, and really start already deploying these machines. Because also I think the race of AI will be at some point who has most robots in the field and who can leverage the data collected on these robots. So we need to get to a certain scale to scale this up, similar to autonomous car companies.
Makes a ton of sense. Absolutely. So in that sense, you really want to be a global leader, if not the global leader in your space.
Yeah, so that would be our ambition. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. I only have some rapid fire questions for you to wrap up the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm giving you different options to choose from, or a short question you have to answer in one sentence. You ready?
Okay.
Which one of your robots is your favorite?
Obviously, I love our robot with the wheels and the legs, but I would always say the Boston Dynamics Atlas robot. Like if I choose another one that I love. Yeah.
Are you more of an early bird or a night owl?
If I leave it up to what I want, I would be in the night, but I try to force myself to be in the early.
Okay. Why is that? Because of the team or?
No, because it's more efficient.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your favorite robot movie, if you have any?
Ex Machina.
Yeah, perfect. What has entrepreneurship taught you so far?
As I describe it, you're almost building like a little bit your own society with your team. So that's kind of cool to see.
Very nice. Yeah. And if you hadn't built Swiss Smile, what would you be doing right now?
Probably trying another startup.
Nice. Yeah. So for sure a startup. Very nice.
And maybe if a few of them don't work out, maybe then I say, okay, maybe I should go and work for another company. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Right.
And my last question for you today, if you had to rate your happiness on a scale from 0, very unhappy, to 10, very happy right now, what number would you give yourself?
Like a 10. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Marko, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was deeply impressive. I really root for you. I hope we continue to see, hear, and read much, much more from you and your company. And I wish you all the best and lots of success.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really like, I feel honored to be here.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.